There are endings that don't start with shouting or betrayal. Sometimes, they begin quietly, with a sigh, a soft tone, or a simple sentence that changes everything. That's how it started with Zoe. Not with drama, but with calm. With words that sounded gentle enough to seem harmless, yet final enough to erase a future. I didn't notice it at first. Love has a way of dulling your instincts, making you slow to recognize decay. When you're happy, you assume the other person is too. You mistake distance for exhaustion, silence for peace. I thought we were fine, even content. We were engaged, planning a wedding, discussing colors, menus, flowers. Everything looked complete on paper. But sometimes, the most stable relationships are just the quietest ones dying. Zoe and I had been together for 3 years. She worked in marketing, always polished, always composed. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen, but over time, she started looking past me instead of at me. It wasn't obvious. It was in the small things: her phone flipped over during dinner, her smile delayed by half a second, the way she pulled away slightly when I reached for her hand. The first time I felt her slipping was during our usual Saturday morning routine. We'd sit by the cafe window, the one with the chip table and the same old jazz playing. She'd always tell stories about work or her friends, her voice animated, her hands moving as she spoke. That morning, she just stared outside, barely touching her coffee. I asked if something was wrong, and she said she was just tired. I believed her. I always did. The distance grew so slowly that by the time I realized how wide it had become, it was too late to close it. Our conversations thinned, our evenings became silent, and our laughter, once effortless, started sounding like a memory we were trying to recreate. Then came that Thursday evening. The city was gray, the kind of gray that makes even the lights look tired. She came home later than usual. I remember the way she set her bag down, careful, deliberate, as if every movement required thought. She stood there for a while, her eyes unfocused, before saying she needed to talk. Her voice didn't shake. It was steady, practiced, like she had rehearsed it. She said she was overwhelmed. Work, wedding plans, expectations, everything. She said she felt trapped, that she couldn't breathe. She said she needed time to think. Space to find herself again. The phrase hung in the air like smoke: I need space. I nodded. What else could I do? I told myself that real love was patient. That maybe stepping back was the right thing. I even tried to sound calm, like it didn't hurt. She smiled faintly, not out of relief, but gratitude, as if I'd made things easier for her. That night, she packed a small bag. A few clothes, her laptop, her notebook. She said she'd stay at her cousin's for a few days. I watched her move through the apartment like a guest checking out of a hotel. Every sound, the click of her suitcase, the rustle of fabric, felt heavier than it should have. When the door closed behind her, silence took over instantly. Not the kind that soothes, but the kind that presses on your chest. The first night, I stayed awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, convincing myself this was normal. The second night, I caught myself reaching for my phone to text her, then stopped. I didn't want to sound desperate. By the third, I started counting hours between her replies, which was easy, because there weren't any. Her absence was everywhere. The bed felt colder, the kitchen quieter. I'd make coffee and pour 2 cups by habit. Her toothbrush still sat next to mine, her sweater still hung on the chair. The apartment looked like she'd only stepped out for groceries, except she wasn't coming back. A week passed. I sent one message, short, careful. Hope you're okay. It stayed unread. That's when it hit me: she wasn't taking space. She was leaving it. I started to notice details I'd ignored: the new perfume she'd started wearing, the way she'd changed her phone password, the faint smell of someone else's cologne on her scarf one night when she came home late a few weeks before she left. At the time, I'd convinced myself I was imagining things. Love does that: it teaches you to explain away pain so you can keep it. The days stretched, slow and heavy. I tried to keep my life running, go to work, smile, pretend I was fine. But my mind stayed anchored to her absence. I'd walk through our apartment and realize how much of it was her. Every corner carried her touch: the books she'd arranged by color, the vase she'd insisted we buy, the framed photo of us at the lake. One evening, I found myself staring at that photo. We looked so happy. It was taken the day we got engaged, right before sunset. I remember her saying she felt lucky. Maybe she meant it then. Or maybe she was already pretending. That night, I sat in the dark, no music, no TV, just silence. I realized something simple, something that felt both devastating and freeing: she wasn't lost. She had already found a version of herself that didn't include me. And I was the only one still standing where we used to be. The truth didn't come through confrontation. It came through a photograph. It was the 9th day since she'd left. I was at work, pretending to focus. The office buzzed around me, laughter, keyboard clicks, phones ringing, but none of it reached me. Everything sounded muffled, as if I were underwater. When heartbreak settles in, the world doesn't stop, it just moves without you. I was scrolling through social media to kill time when I saw it. A photo, posted by one of her friends, the same ones who used to comment on our pictures, who said we looked perfect together. There they were, smiling at a dimly lit bar. And at the edge of the frame stood Zoe. It took me a second to recognize her. She looked lighter somehow, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her head was tilted slightly toward the man beside her, his hand resting casually on her back. His face was half turned, but I knew it instantly. Her ex. The one she said was just a memory. My thumb froze on the screen. My chest felt heavy, not with shock but with understanding. It was almost like relief, the kind you feel when confusion finally ends, even if what replaces it hurts more. She hadn't needed space. She'd needed distance from guilt. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, studying the way she leaned toward him, how her smile reached her eyes, something it hadn't done for me in weeks. The caption was nothing special. Just a night out. But it said everything I needed to know. I closed the app and sat there, motionless. Around me, people kept typing, joking, living. I couldn't join them. The world kept spinning, but I was stuck in that single, frozen moment, watching the woman I loved look happy with someone else. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't rage, didn't send messages, didn't ask for explanations. The need for answers disappears when you already have them. That night, the apartment felt different. The air seemed colder. I made dinner, but the smell of food made me nauseous. Her mug was still on the counter, lipstick faintly marking the rim. I stared at it for a long time before finally picking it up and placing it in a box. I spent the rest of the night cleaning, though there wasn't much to clean. It wasn't about dust or order. It was about control. When your world falls apart, you cling to anything you can fix. I deleted her contact from my phone, even though I knew the number by heart. I removed our photos from my home screen. I took down the framed picture on the shelf, the one where we were laughing under the rain, soaked and happy. I turned it face down, unable to throw it away yet. Each small act hurt less than the last. By the end of the night, the pain dulled into something quieter, exhaustion more than heartbreak. The following morning, I went to work as usual. The day moved in a blur. At lunch, I found myself scrolling again, half hoping the photo had vanished, as if the universe might grant me mercy. It hadn't. The image was still there. Permanent. Public. Undeniable. That night, I sat in the dark and stared out the window. I watched people walk by below, couples holding hands, friends laughing, headlights passing through puddles. I thought about how love could look so strong from the outside and be collapsing from within. I wondered when exactly she stopped loving me. Was it when she met him again? When we picked the wedding date? Or long before that, when I stopped being new, and comfort turned into boredom? By the end of that week, I accepted something I never thought I would: love doesn't end suddenly. It fades. Quietly. The other person just notices sooner. Days turned into weeks. Life resumed its rhythm, but mine stayed offbeat. I functioned, worked, slept, ate, but it felt mechanical. My thoughts kept circling the same conclusion: I'd been erased from a story I helped write. Then, one evening, my phone lit up. Her name. I hesitated before opening it. Her message was short. She said she'd been thinking. That she needed the break. That she felt better now. That she missed me. Missed me. The words sat there on the screen, neat and harmless. I should have felt something: anger, sadness, relief. Instead, I felt nothing. Just emptiness, like hearing an echo in a room already cleared out. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She wrote as if nothing had happened, as if time had been kind to both of us. Maybe, in her mind, it had. Maybe she believed distance could reset things. But what she didn't know was that her silence had already done its work. It had closed the chapter for me. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down on the table and watched the screen fade to black. The quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the room again. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the floor. The apartment was still, but it didn't feel haunted anymore. The absence that used to hurt now felt like space, real space, the kind that lets you breathe. I made coffee, 1 cup this time, and sat by the window. Outside, people hurried to work, the city already alive. I realized I was okay, not healed, not free, but okay. There was no anger left. Just acceptance. She had wanted space. And now, I finally understood what that word really meant. It wasn't a request. It was a decision. She wanted to see who she was without me. And somewhere between her leaving and that photograph, I'd started to learn who I was without her. The irony wasn't lost on me: the space she needed had set me free too. Time didn't heal anything right away. It just moved, carrying the weight of everything I didn't yet know how to let go of. In the beginning, silence felt unbearable. It filled every corner of the apartment, echoing off the walls, reminding me of what used to be. But over time, it began to shift. What once felt like absence started to sound like calm. It wasn't healing yet, it was just the first breath after drowning. I built my days out of small, predictable things. Waking up early. Running before sunrise. The cold air against my skin was brutal at first, but it reminded me I was alive. I'd make breakfast for one, eggs, coffee, toast, the same thing every morning, a routine that didn't depend on anyone else. At work, I buried myself in tasks. Deadlines, meetings, projects, all of it blurred together. My coworkers thought I was fine because I smiled in the right moments. Grief is easier to hide than people think. It doesn't always show up as tears, sometimes it's just silence disguised as composure. Weeks passed. The messages from Zoe came in bursts. Always brief, always polite. She'd say she hoped I was doing well, or that she'd seen something that reminded her of us. Each time, I read the words without emotion. They no longer had power. They were echoes of a language I no longer spoke. I never replied. My silence became my shield. The first real change came one Sunday morning. I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. It was the same light that used to spill across her side of the bed. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to roll over and reach for her. I just lay there, breathing, feeling the quiet. That morning, I cleaned the apartment, really cleaned it. Not the aimless tidying I'd done before, but something deliberate. I packed her remaining things into boxes. Perfume bottles, framed photos, the cardigan she left draped on the chair. Each item carried a memory, and I let myself feel every one of them before sealing the box shut. I didn't throw it away. I just moved it to the closet. Out of sight, but not erased. Healing, I realized, wasn't about pretending the past didn't exist. It was about learning to live beside it. After that, I started noticing small changes in myself. I wasn't counting days anymore. I didn't flinch when her name came up. I didn't check her social media. The grip of habit was loosening. The silence that once felt oppressive became peaceful. I started to crave it. After work, I'd come home, make dinner, and play music, not to fill the quiet, but to enjoy it. I rediscovered songs I hadn't listened to in years, music I'd stopped playing because she didn't like it. It felt like reclaiming parts of myself I'd left behind. One evening, I found myself laughing, genuinely laughing, at something on TV. It startled me. The sound felt unfamiliar, but right. A few days later, I ran into her by chance. It was on a crowded street near the old coffee shop we used to visit. She looked the same, composed, graceful, perfectly put together. When our eyes met, she smiled. A small, testing smile. I nodded, nothing more, and kept walking. My chest didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. There was no urge to turn back. For the first time, I understood what closure really looked like, not dramatic goodbyes, not apologies, just indifference where pain used to live. The seasons changed. The air turned colder, then soft again. I found new rhythms, morning runs turning into weekend hikes, quiet evenings into nights spent reading, thinking, writing. There was still loneliness, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentle, like a shadow that followed me without harm. Zoe messaged again one evening, a longer text this time. She said she'd been thinking about me, that she missed how safe we used to feel. I stared at the message for a long time before locking my phone. I didn't delete it. I just left it unanswered, like all the others. Her silence used to be a wound. Mine became a boundary. With every week that passed, I felt more at peace. The memories still existed, the good and the bad, but they no longer defined me. I could think of her without ache, the way you think of a city you once lived in, familiar streets, familiar weather, but no desire to return. Friends started noticing the difference. My coworker Nate said I looked calmer, more grounded. He was right. The chaos had burned itself out, and what was left was something quiet and steady. One Saturday, while organizing the closet, I found the box of her things again. Dust had gathered on it. I opened it out of curiosity. The perfume had faded. The sweater smelled like nothing. The photos looked like strangers. I closed the lid and carried the box downstairs to the dumpster. I didn't hesitate this time. As I watched the lid close, I felt no sadness. Just relief. That night, I went for a run under the streetlights. The city was silent except for the hum of distant traffic. The cold wind stung my face, but it felt good, honest, clean. I realized I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was just moving forward. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. I stood by the window, sweat cooling on my skin, looking out at the lights flickering across the skyline. Somewhere out there, Zoe was living her new life. I didn't hate her for it. I didn't wish her harm. I just wished her distance. Peace doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, disguised as small moments that don't hurt anymore. And as I stood there that night, calm, alone, steady, I realized something simple. I hadn't just survived losing her. I'd outgrown needing her at all. It was late November when her name lit up my screen again. The message came close to midnight. I was sitting by the window, watching rain slide down the glass in thin silver lines. The city outside was quiet, just the low hum of passing cars, the distant sound of a train. The kind of night that feels suspended in time. Her text began the same way all her messages did, casual, disarming. But this one was longer. Paragraphs that filled the screen. Words that looked heavier than before. She said she'd been thinking a lot. That she'd made mistakes. That she was sorry. She said she wanted to come home. I read it once. Then again. Slowly. The tone was familiar, but it didn't feel the same. Months ago, that message would have set my heart racing. Now, it barely stirred anything. It was like reading a story I already knew the ending to. I looked around the apartment, the space that used to feel like ours. Everything was in its place, simple and steady. My plants had grown taller. The shelves I'd built now held books instead of photos. The air no longer smelled like her perfume, and for the first time, that felt right. Zoe wrote that she'd been confused. That she didn't leave for someone else, but to understand herself. She said being without me had shown her what she'd lost. She wanted to fix it. I sat there, phone in hand, and realized something strange. I believed her. Not in the way that made me want to take her back, but in the way you believe that people are capable of being lost. Maybe she really did mean every word. Maybe she really was sorry. But I'd spent too long rebuilding myself to hand that piece away again. I thought about all the nights I'd spent in silence, the running, the cleaning, the mornings that had taught me how to live without her. I thought about how long it had taken for the pain to turn into calm. Her words didn't stir the ache she expected. They only reminded me of how far I'd come. I typed slowly. My hands didn't shake. I told her the truth, that I wasn't angry, that I didn't hate her, but that the home she wanted to return to no longer existed. It wasn't about walls or furniture, it was about connection. The thread that once tied us together had been quietly cut, not in a single moment, but over time, through every silence, every small betrayal. When I hit send, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. She replied almost immediately. Her words came fast, desperate this time. She said I was wrong, that we could still start over, that what we had was worth saving. She wrote about love, about history, about second chances. But the thing about second chances is that they only matter when both people are still standing in the same place. I wasn't there anymore. I read her messages once more before setting my phone down. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled faintly. I sat there for a while, listening to it, feeling the steady rhythm of my own breathing. When I finally looked at the phone again, I deleted her messages, not out of anger, but because I didn't need to keep them. They belonged to a version of my life that no longer fit. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. It painted the walls in soft gold. I brewed coffee, opened the window slightly, and let the cold air in. It smelled like rain and something cleaner, something like renewal. I went for a run through the park, the one where we used to walk. The ground was slick from last night's storm. As I jogged past the bench where we'd once sat together, I slowed for just a moment. The memory was still there, but it didn't hurt anymore. It just existed, like an old photograph you've stopped keeping on display. A few days later, I saw her again. It was at a friend's wedding, a coincidence, nothing more. She was standing near the bar, wearing a blue dress that shimmered under the lights. When she saw me, she froze for half a second, then smiled, small and uncertain. I nodded politely and turned away. For a brief moment, I caught my reflection in the glass, suit pressed, tie straight, calm eyes. I didn't look like the man who had been left behind. I looked like someone who'd finally caught up to his own life. Later that evening, when the reception ended, I stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky clear. Music drifted faintly from inside, laughter, clinking glasses, the hum of a world that kept moving. I walked down the steps slowly, hands in my pockets, feeling the night settle around me. There was no bitterness left. No longing. Just peace. I thought about the word she'd used months ago, space. It had sounded like distance back then, like punishment. But now I understood it differently. Space wasn't just emptiness. It was possibility. It was the room I needed to become someone else, someone whole, steady, enough. She had wanted freedom. And I had given it to her. But in doing so, I'd found mine too. At home, I stood by the window again. The same window where I'd once watched her leave. The reflection staring back wasn't the same man, not harder, not colder, just quieter. Peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly, settling in the corners of your life until one day you realize you've stopped waiting for anything. Zoe had wanted space. I gave it to her. And in that space, I found myself again, stronger, calmer, whole.